Hey everyone, John here. Welcome back to another Sapphire tutorial. This time I want to walk you through some tips and techniques on how to get the most out of the liquid glass preset that I actually created using Sapphire Effect Builder. So we'll start here in After Effects, but we'll also switch across to Avid a bit later and take a look in Resolve as well. So I'm going to apply Sapphire Effect just by searching for Effect in Effect and Presets panel. Just drop that onto the layer and click on Load Preset. Now I'm in Sapphire 2026, so I can find that directly in the New category. Just by scrolling down, and you'll find it right here. Okay, so this was a particular challenge for me. I'm pretty used to using Sapphire Effect Builder, and I thought we haven't really got a sort of glassy or liquid glass look, so how do I create it? And I spent a little bit of time inside the builder coming up with something that I feel looks fairly realistic. I wouldn't say it's 100% realistic, but I think in many cases it'll get the job done. So what I'd like to do is walk you through the custom parameters in After Effects here, and then we'll go into the builder and we'll take a look a little more deeply at how it was set up. And then we'll customize it a little bit and also how to look at how to use masks as well. Okay, so quick run through of the custom stuff. Here in After Effects, I can actually click in the middle of one of these objects and move it around. So there's a circle here. There's also this sort of pill shape, and I can move that around. Watch what happens when I move them close to each other. They actually get that sort of 3D sort of metaball style thing going on, which I thought was kind of cool when I set it up. But also when you go to the edge of the comp, it looks fairly natural when it moves out from the edges of the composition. You see how it kind of leaks in here and then grows. So I kind of like that. Now let's take a look here in the settings. O1 pill is basically this shape here. We'll take a look at how that was built in a moment. But we just saw position then. I like to use the on-screen controls for that. You've also got a scale. So you could scale this individually. So you could do like a water drop, like bloop, and sort of get that kind of look. And you've got rotation. You can see how it's distorting the image below. The next is circle. Very straightforward. We just looked at how to move that then. Now, O3 distort and scale. If I increase amplitude, this gives you more of a sort of liquid kind of look. And this has some auto animation in it. You can actually turn that off inside the builder, but I kind of like that movement. And you've got a left and a right, or X and Y shift speed as well. And also a Z distribution or Z distribution. And this is actually controlling the size of the pill and the circle together. You see if I do this, it will change the scale of both of them. And I actually kind of like this look. So if I make it fairly big and grab the position point of this one, you see how I move that across like that, which looks kind of interesting. That's the wrong one. Grab this one, and they can join together like that. Next is edge detail. And looking back at this, preparing for this tutorial, I was thinking I probably should have called this edge bevel or chamfer, because if you see what happens when I adjust this, see if I decrease it, see how it gives it less bevel? And if I increase it, it gives it more bevel. Now, all of these below, spec highlight A and B, glass A, B, and C, are all really just there for you to adjust the look of the glass. You won't see a lot of huge change when you adjust these values. It'll really depend on the footage that you're using. And in a moment, we're going to take a look at it on some dark footage, because we'll have to use these to adjust how the glass looks on dark footage. But have a play with these. You can see how like highlight size increases or decreases the size of the highlight. So specular highlights, obviously it's not actually really reflecting anything. It's not like it's reflecting an HDR, but I've called them spec highlights anyway, because that's what these look like. And there's also 3 glass looks, and this is using 3 versions of EmbossDistort inside of Sapphire Builder. And these can also be used to adjust the lightness or the darkness of the look. and the scale of the bumps. So once again, sort of fine tuning it. And we'll look at these in a little bit more detail in a moment. This one here though, number 10, this is using Sapphire Layer. And this is these are the parameters I thought would be most useful for you in the host. And they're basically controlling the foreground and the background, because Sapphire Layer combines a foreground and background. So in this case, the foreground is the glass and the background is the footage. So if I play with the foreground opacity, you can see how that's changing the glass, making that more like Quicksilver, mercury. And the foreground lights, I can darken and lighten that up. So you can play around with those. And there's also foreground blur. If I increase that, it takes away some of that specularity. So I guess all of these combined from 5 to 10 are all about adjusting how the glass looks. So what we'll do next is jump into the builder and break this down in a little bit more detail. So I've just reset that, and I'm going to click on Edit Effect to launch Sapphire Effect Builder. And let's break this down. All right, so I'm in vertical view, choosing View, Vertical Window Layout. And let's start not at the source, because that goes all the way down to here. Let's start at Pill Circle. I'm going to turn on Preview Selected Node. And what I'll also do is just come in here and fit this just to make it a little sharper. Okay, so first thing is Sapphire Shape. There's a circle there. Now, Sapphire Shape doesn't have a rounded rectangle, so I had to make one myself. So what I did was use Sapphire Warp Transform to mirror that, and then Sapphire Composite to put that into the front and the original pill into the back to give me that kind of a binocular look. And then Sapphire Shape again, just to add in the rectangle, that gives me the pill shape. Now, of course, if I move anything around, like if I grab that, it's going to change it and make it look weird, right? So what I did was I used Sapphire Warp Transform below that, and there's the controls we saw in the host in After Effects, position, scale, and rotation. So all of the control of that pill shape is done using Warp Transform. Now I've added in Sapphire Shape again for the circle, just to give you an alternative shape. And you saw how when we moved those closer together, it got that kind of metaballs look, which was quite interesting. But if you didn't want a circle, you could just click on Load Preset for S shape, and you could choose a different shape, maybe a star. So you can definitely play around with that. There's also triangles. I'm going to cancel that. Now, beneath that, we have Sapphire WarpBubble. So remember, we talked a moment ago about the auto animation. So that's giving you this kind of bubbly look. So WarpBubble has a shift speed there. You can see that's turned on. We looked at that in After Effects. Also, the amplitude is turned on. You can turn any of these on if you like to have them appear in the host. I think one thing that I would like to do to customize this is to add the seed. That could be really useful. Now, beneath that, we have edge detail. And this is just blurring that. And this is what helps to create that kind of metaball look where the things join together. And remember, we said that maybe the naming is not quite right. You could actually rename this. You could say edge bevel. And that might make it a little clearer. Now, beneath that, we have Sapphire Emboss Shiny, EmbossDistort, and we have S Cutout. So these are all the ones that are creating the specular highlights. I'm not going to go into any of these. You've already seen how these have been made available in the host. And this is just giving us that specular look, okay? It took me a bit of work to do this. And to be honest, if I recreated this, I might not create it exactly the same way as I created this. Maybe I would find a more optimal way to do it. And you might have an even better way to create this look. Now that's going into the foreground in S layer. And let's go back to the source. So there's my source. And all of these are the EmbossDistort effects that we looked at in the host. These are all distorting the background. Okay, this is creating the background distortion. And you can see how in the bumps port of EmbossDistort, I'm using the edge bevel. So that's controlling where the distortion happens. And notice also here, I'm using that for Spec HB as well, Highlights B, and Spec Highlights Matte B. So all using the edge bevel S-blur layer as the matte. But over here, as the bumps. So there's 1, 2, 3. It took me a few just to join them together to try to get the look that I wanted. Notice how it is giving a little bit of aliasing here. We're going to look at how we might be able to fix that in a moment. And that's going into the background of Sapphire layer. And with the specks on top, we get that look. Okay, so that's how I built this. It took a little bit of time, but like I said, I think the result is reasonably worthwhile. Now, let's customize this a little bit more. Since looking at this, I kind of don't like that aliasing that it gives me. I mean, most of the time you're not going to notice it if this is moving quickly, but let's see if we can improve that. So how do you think we might be able to fix that? I was thinking maybe a little bit of blur might help. So we want to blur the background. We want to blur the source. So the best place to put the blur effect would be after the source, right? So I'll select the source and I'll hit the tab key for the quick menu and I'll type in blur and select blur. That's going to blur everything. So what do? We use a matte, okay? And what should we use? Well, we probably should use the edge bevel. So I'll just quickly grab that. If I can just roll in and grab that and just use that as the matte. Okay. So now we've actually matted that blur out. There's probably a little too much blur there. I'm going to bring that down. Something quite subtle, something like that. And let's just turn off previous selected node. So now we've blurred that a little bit. Okay, so that's one way you could do that. You could use rack defocus. You could use a variety of different effects to do that. And just jumping back into After Effects for a moment, you can see how that has softened that aliasing. I'm just viewing this at 100% resolution. And maybe that's a little bit too much. And I want to adjust that in the host parameters, but notice there's no blur. I haven't turned that on, so I'll have to go back into Edit Effect. And I just want to point out something I've pointed out in other tutorials as well. When you've exhausted the host parameters, if we click on blur here, you'll get this yellow triangle. So the only way I can turn on parameters here to see in the host is if I turn something else off. And this happens to me occasionally because I use a lot of effects. And what I'll generally do is I'll find something which I know I don't really need to change in the host. So maybe in this case, it is, well, let's say spec highlights A. So I'll toggle that on and off. Now I can come back to blur, and that makes that available. So I can turn blur amount on. Just call this blur, get rid of the 1, and click OK. Now you will get this message, and this is why I always get these things set up before I set keyframes in the host. So where's my blur? There it is. I could give it a number if I needed to. But now here in the host, since this is an important parameter, I can adjust that. So I can give it just a touch, just enough to knock back that aliasing, right? That's off just a little bit. And that could help. So in this case, we used blur to customize this, just to control the aliasing. But you can try other different effects and come up with all kinds of different looks. You could add some dust in here. So there's, maybe make some bubbles inside the water. Distortion, texture flux, which is more of a watery texture. Just try different things. But what we'll do next is we'll customize it in a different way to account for darker footage. And I've just reloaded the original preset again. I'm going to go back into my liquid glass base, and I'm going to turn off the text and just turn on this footage. And you can see this is fairly dark. If we come into liquid glass main, watch how this goes a little milky. See now it's gone a little milky, and we need to bring back a little bit of that darkness. So let's adjust this. And I think we can do this fairly quickly just by compensating a little bit under the source using gamma. Just load that up and adjusting the offset darks. Just bring that down, darken that up. So obviously, if I was just to preview selected node, that darkens the footage up quite a lot. But because we're overlaying all of this stuff over the top, especially with the EmbossDistort, which has this light direction and brightness, these will make it look a little bit milky. So just by affecting the source directly, we've just offset that a little bit. But we are getting a little bit of this sort of glow around the edges. So it might be good to go back into the host and just make a few adjustments there as well. So I can't turn on my offset darks here, so I'd have to come back and adjust that, but I'll just leave it like it is for now. So that's darkened that down quite well. Like I said, it's a little bit glowy around the outside there. So I'll see if I can make some adjustments in here. First of all, maybe glass speck highlight. The foreground opacity is adjusting the speck. So if I bring that specular up, that brightens it up quite a lot, doesn't it? At the moment for Sapphire layer, the blend mode is set to normal. So if we just select that and come up to mode, let's try soft light. Okay, maybe colored, or maybe hard light. Wow, that's very bright. Okay, let's just go for soft light. Click OK. And that's a little better, right? That's looking a little better. Come in and maybe play around with the lightness there. And we're getting a little bit closer to what we want. Probably could play with some of the glass settings. Try adjusting the brightness. That's going to make it a little milky. Remember I said that can make the thing look a little milky. This is basically just light direction. Bump scale. So like I said, these are just for fine tuning. That's starting to look a little bit more like I want it to look. Maybe just leave that one as it is. And what about if we come into distort and scale and just change the amplitude a bit? Knock that back a bit and also zoom in a bit. Like that, right? So just by adding in the gamma, changing the blend mode to soft light, and making a few adjustments, we've made it work a little bit better with darker footage. So let's finish this off by taking a look at how you could use your own custom mask with this effect. Okay, so I've reset back to my original preset. And what I've got here in After Effects is this liquid glass layer. So this is the liquid glass text. And importantly, I've applied the fill effect and just made it white because you need the mask layer or the matte layer to be white. So I'll just turn that off and select this again. And I'm going to come in and choose Mask from Layer Liquid Glass. And because I haven't pre-composed this in After Effects, I'll just change source to Effects and Mask. Okay, so it is working, but it's using it as a mask as well. So we'll just go back into Effect Builder and just follow the instructions on the sticky note that I've left for you, which is to disconnect 02 circle, which is this one, and connect the mask. So we'll get rid of that and add that in. Okay, preview selected. So there's my mask. Click OK. And oh, it's disappeared. And this is because we've got fairly thin text and the edge detail, which is the blur, is too high. So it's blurring it out. Watch what happens if I decrease this. Ooh, it comes back, right? Which is quite interesting because you can actually sort of animate that as well. So I'll just bring that back to a lower value, turn off my liquid glass in my pre-comp there, and started to get some glassy text. And you can fine-tune the brightness of the specular and everything just using these settings here. Let's take a look at what this might look like if we change the Z-dist. So you can go up. When you make it bigger, it looks even more interesting. But you can animate that. You can change the amplitude and get some quite interesting effects. So next, let's take a look at how to set that up in Avid. And here in Avid, I've got the default liquid glass preset applied to the grid layer. And below that, I've got a black and white matte So what I'll do first is just open up Sapphire Effect Builder and just plug in the mask. It's like we did in After Effects, just connect that to that. Click OK. Now, nothing's going to happen yet. So here in Avid, we have to choose our mask layer, which is one track below. And again, we have to twirl open edge detail and bring that blur amount down. There we go. So once again, we can create that transition if we wanted to. And again, it's just a case of going in and just adjusting your glass and spec settings. So let's whip across to Resolve now, and we'll take a look at how we do it there. And here in Resolve, I've got my grid. So I'm going to go across to the color page, and I've already done a search for S Effect. I'm just going to drag that in and load the preset. Come down to Liquid Glass, double click. Okay. And we'll go into Edit Liquid Glass. Once again, the same as in the other two hosts, we're going to just plug in the mask. Click OK. And we have to grab our matte, drop it in. I'm going to bring it over here and just plug in the RGB. And also plug in the alpha. Okay, select that again, and once again, decrease the blur amount. There we go. And I might just, in this case, just zoom in a bit. Maybe just blow that a little bit more. And that's how we do it in Resolve. Okay, so hopefully that's given you everything you need to make the most of this preset. If you have any more questions, please leave a comment. You can learn more about Sapphire on the Boris FX website, where you can also download a free trial. For now, this is John. See you in the next tutorial.